Hello, my name is Bill Zariello, and I work with the Solid Training Unit in the Department of Consumer Affairs. This video is going to walk you through 7 simple steps to help make your Microsoft Word documents more accessible from scratch. We're also going to be looking at how to correct and remediate some issues that you may have found in older existing documents as well. Now, I know that there is a lot of panic and anxiety around this topic of making our Office documents accessible. Which documents are we looking at? How soon does this have to be done? How much work is this? Who's responsible to do the work? But I assure you, it is very simple if you follow the 7 steps. All the tools necessary have been in Word for years. You just need to use some existing features that are already in the software. And my hope is that this video is going to help alleviate most of those fears. My objectives here, I would like to make Office Word documents accessible from scratch and show you how to do that. We're currently focusing on the internet pages and content linked thereon, but my 2 cents, I think there will be more regulations around intranet pages and content coming, if not all documents created. So why learn how to make 2 different types of documents depending on where you think it might get posted? You should plan to learn to use these techniques and employ them for all Word documents going forward. There is nothing here that any standard Word user cannot master in time, quickly, and easily. I will not be demonstrating every feature or function in Microsoft Word today. We are just looking at those items that are pertaining to digital accessibility. And this demonstration is intended only for information guidance and awareness of Microsoft Word accessibility features. And each document author should be aware of the steps necessary to make their own content compliant. This is not meant as a substitute for the department's legal rights and responsibilities. Why accessibility? It's the law. Accessibility means that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with your website without barriers. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, which became law in 1990, requires state and local governments, businesses, nonprofit organizations, labor unions to make reasonable accommodations. And if my webcam were on, you would see me doing air quotes around the words reasonable accommodations for employees with disabilities. ADA is a broad law against disability discrimination that applies to agencies and organizations with 15 or more employees. Section 508, on the other hand, essentially tells employers how to comply with ADA. Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, first adopted in 1973 and amended by Congress in 1998, requires federal agencies to make their electronic information accessible to people with disabilities. The rules were originally established in the early days of the Internet, but Section 508 was remodernized in 2017 to align with Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, are separated into 3 levels of conformance. These roughly translate into Level A, which is the basic stuff. Your web page is going to be accessible. You're not going to be referring to items by color for those who have either color blindness or limited visibility. Level AA, which is the essential stuff, which is your web page and your web content. Documents which are attached to your web page will be accessible. Your colors will be highly contrastable so that you will be able to see fonts on top of a different color in the background. And then level AAA, shooting for the moon. All sorts of applications and helper files that will be able to get people through the web pages and the content. State of California is currently going for level AA, or the essential. California's government code directs that state governmental entities in developing, procuring, maintaining, or using electronic or information technology, either indirectly or through the use of state funds by other entities, shall comply with the accessibility requirements of Section 508. Additionally, a new California law mandates that all governmental websites must include a post on the homepage linked to a signed certificate from the agency's director and chief information officer stating that the website is in compliance with COG guidelines. How people with disabilities navigate the web. If they are blind or have limited visibility, these users will be using a screen reader, and that screen reader is used to navigate the website by reading back to the user what is on the screen. It's reading the text that it finds. So if there is an image, there needs to be some sort of alternate text added with the image so that that text can be read back what is in that picture for that blind or limited visibility user. For those with limited dexterity, they're using a speech recognition software that allows the user to use their voice to navigate through a web page. They're using their voice to add text. They're using their voice to speak certain commands to actually have the software perform certain functions for them. If they are deaf or hard of hearing, they're looking for closed captioning in videos that's going to allow them to read the information that's being presented that would otherwise be inaccessible. So let's start into our 7 steps. We're going to be using the Department of Rehabilitation's booklet, and it is posted on the Solid website as well as the Department of Rehabilitation. And in there, they have identified 7 steps for making accessible Word documents from scratch. But I'm also going to try and share with you some tips in order to help correct and remediate any inaccessible areas in existing Word documents you may already have posted. Ready? Step 1. You want to make sure that you are using an appropriate font style and size. The state of California has determined that the appropriate font size should be 12-point or above. This does not mean that your department may have a preference for larger than 12-point. However, the minimum set for the state of California should be at 12-point or above. They have also requested that you use a sans serif font style, like an Arial, a Calibri, a Trebuchet MS, Verdana, Century Gothic. These are just some of the sans serif font styles. They're not all of them. But the difference between a serif font style and a sans serif font style, in a serif font style, there are these tails or feet that have been added onto the ends of the letters. They are also not the same thickness all the way throughout the letter. A sans serif does not have those feet or tails, and they are the same thickness all the way throughout the drawing of the letter. If you use a serif font, those serifs are going to trip up a screen reader as it goes through. It's more difficult to read overall. It's much cleaner if you're using a sans serif font style. For step 1, there are 2 examples I want to show you. The first example is starting from a brand new document and how I can change my defaults to match the sans serif font style and the font size that I would like, and how I can make those changes set so every time I close Microsoft Word and reopen it, I have the correct sans serif font style and size in place. The second one will be working with an existing document with existing fonts and sizes in use and how I can change them back to the correct sans serif font style and font size I would like to use as my preference. Our first example, we have a blank Microsoft Word document. By default, when Microsoft opens, it is set as Calibri body or plus body and 11-point, and that's the default for Microsoft out of the box, unless somebody has changed that for you already. In order to change my default font style, my default font size, I'm going up into the font area on my home menu bar, and in the font area down in the lower right, you see this small arrow. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this small arrow, which means there are more options I can do to the font styles and sizes that are not shown on this particular box. So currently it shows that I have highlighted plus body or Calibri body, that it is regular, so it's not italicized or bold and italicized, and that it's 11-point. And I think my department has a preference for possibly using Century Gothic and 14-point. So I want to reset my defaults to be Century Gothic and 14 point every time I close Word and reopen it, so I don't have to reset it every single time. So I'm going to go down and find my Century Gothic. And I'm going to go and click on size 14. If I click on OK, I've changed it for this one particular document. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the opposite side where it says Set as Default. And when I click on Set as Default, it says, would I like to use it just for this particular document, or do I want to do it on all documents based on the normal template? Choosing option 2 is going to change the defaults on the normal template, which is the blank template that opens up. And when I do that and click OK, it updates my Calibri body to Century Gothic. It updates it from 11 point to 14 point. And also by doing it, by changing my defaults, it's used those options in some of my styles that were based off of my normals that were being chosen. So these have been automatically updated as well. Our second example, we have an existing document. It has been created with Cambria, which is a serif font, so you can see the footers that are on there, or the tails that are on there, and it's an 11 point. And I want to go ahead and make sure that this is all sans serif, and that it's at least 12 point or above. I can do a couple of things. I can select all the text in my document and change it manually. I can do that either by being on the home ribbon and going over to Select and choosing Select All. I can do the same thing by putting my cursor just inside of the text of the document and holding my Control key and hitting my A key at the same time, which is Control, and A is Select All. And now any choices I make will affect my document completely. If I choose to make this again, Century Gothic and 14, I have everything in there now as Century Gothic and 14. By doing it manually, however, I did not affect any of my styles. So if for some reason somebody is using a style based off of my defaults are still set at Cambria and 11 point. And it could mess up the document. So I'm going to back up. And once I've done this, I'm going to go ahead and reset my defaults on this document again. So I'm going to go into the lower arrow on my font box. I'm going to change it from Cambria to, again, my department's preference of Century Gothic and 14. And instead of clicking OK, I'm going to go to Set as Default and make sure that I choose it just for this document only. And when I choose for this document only and click OK, it updates everything to Century Gothic and 14. It updated my defaults to Century Gothic and 14 for this document, and at the same time it updated my styles that were built off of my defaults in my normal. One caveat that I will offer, be sure that you know how your entire document is styled before you make global changes to it. If parts of your document have been styled differently than the global changes you are making, you're going to wipe out those styles that are currently in the document and replace them with your defaults. So use your global changes sparingly. Step 2. You want to use color and contrast appropriately. You need to be aware that sometimes font colors can be too close to the background colors that are being used to fill in the object behind them. So if they're printed, even your sighted users may not see enough contrast between the two, and it may come out looking all gray. This is what your limited visibility or your colorblind users will see, and black and white is always going to be your best bet in creating the largest contrast. Some people also have difficulty distinguishing between greens and reds and blues and yellows with color blindness. If you refer to an object as click the green button or point to the blue line of text, they may not see that color. It may just all appear gray to them. So you want to be aware of those people who may be colorblind. Also, you never want to use a color only to distinguish important information in charts, in graphs, and in data sets. If you do that, those colors may all appear gray to some users, so you want to use some sort of a shape to also help distinguish between the types of data that you're showing. For example, in the workbook, we have a small chart here, and somebody has created this chart in order to show the due dates of project tasks and whether or not they were completed. And they're using a green X for completed and a red X for not completed. Somebody with color blindness will only see that row of X's as gray. So everything will appear to have either been completed because it has an X in it, because they may be expecting that something without an X means not completed. So it is misleading. So you want to make sure that you are using not just color to distinguish between your data, but you always want to make sure that you are also using shape. So this is the same chart redone, in which it shows our project tasks, our due dates, and whether or not those items were completed. For our sighted users, they still have green and red, so they can easily jump through this chart very quickly. But for our non-sighted users who may see green and red as only gray, they will also have the shapes which will help distinguish between what has been completed and what has not been completed. Step 3, adding alternative text and captions. Now, images in Microsoft Word documents are not seen by screen readers. Screen readers are looking for text. So the document authors have to add alternative text to help screen readers tell the user what is inside of each one of those images. It's a 1 or 2 sentence description, and if that image is not pertinent to the understanding of the document, that image can be marked as decorative and will not be read back to the user. They can also use alternative text to help describe the contents of what is inside of a chart and also what is inside of a data array set as a table. They can also add captions underneath each one of those items to help with the understanding as well. In addition, you want to make sure that the wrap text feature is set as in line with text, so that the alternative text that you're adding to your images is read only once and at the specific location where you would like it to be read and not repeatedly throughout a paragraph. The default setting is currently set to in line with text in Microsoft Word. For example, in our sample document, we have our board of directors, we have their photographs, and we have their bios. What we want to make sure to do first is to make sure that each one of the images that are in here has alternative text. So I'm going to be working on our top board of director. This is our president, Ted Kellogg. I want to make sure that his image has alternative text which describes back with the use of a screen reader that this is an image of our board president, Ted Kellogg. I'm going to select the image and I'm going to do a right click. And on the right click, I'm going to choose from my shortcut menu, Edit Alt Text. It opens a pane on the right-hand side and asks me for a 1 to 2 sentence recommended description. Image of board president Ted Kellogg. If this were a decorative item that I didn't want read back, I could go ahead and just check the box, mark as decorative, and the screen reader would skip that. Once I've entered in my 1 to 2 sentence short description, I'm going to just close the alt text box. It doesn't remove the alternative text. If I do a right click on it and say edit my alt text, it brings up exactly what was entered there already. Be aware that Microsoft Word can be set to generate what it thinks may be alternative text. It's not very intuitive. For example, I had a photograph of the Statue of Liberty, and Microsoft Word put in that it was a young boy holding a candle over its head. So make sure that if you allow the software to generate your descriptions, they're the actual descriptions of what you would like to be entered. Once I've entered my alternative text, I want to make sure what my wrapping is. So I select my image again, and we have this small wrap feature, our layout options box. And if I click on that box, it shows me what the layout option is set to. The default would have been in line with text, but it's currently set to do wrapping. That's going to wrap all the way around that particular image, which means currently if I'm reading back with a screen reader Ted Kellogg's bio, it will read line 1 of the bio, read the alternative text on the photo, read line 2 of the bio, and reread the alternative text with every line of the bio, which I don't want. I want to make sure that I set this alternative text in line exactly where I want it so it's read one time and not repeatedly. To do that, I'm going to select my layout options and choose inline with text. What it does is it pushes the rest of the text out of the way, and at this point it will read the alternative text for Ted Kellogg's photograph and then the rest of his bio one time. Most people look at this and say that's kind of an ugly layout. So you can always put your cursor in his first name, use your arrow keys to get between the image and his bio, and just hit your enter key. And now it will read just the alternative text for his picture and then just his bio. For some people, they don't like this big white space. They think it's a waste. So I will show you a way in which you can put an image in one side of a table and the biography in another side of a table, a two-celled table. And that way it will read the first cell and then the second cell without repeating the alternative text on the image. Underneath, meet the board of directors. I'm going to just go ahead and enter in a very small, I'm going to use my insert, and enter in a very small two-celled table. I'm going to select the image and click and drag it and drop it in the first cell. I'm going to resize my table to put the border right next to the image, and then I'm going to select Ted's bio, and I'm going to click and drag that into the second cell. Now what I have done is I've created one cell with the image, one cell with the bio. And as a screen reader comes to the table, it will read the contents of the first cell, and then it will read the contents of the second cell without jumping back to the first cell every single time. People like that it looks, again, like the lower one, except it has borders. How do I remove the borders? I'm just going to go ahead and in the left-hand side of the document with my cursor pointing to the upper right, I'm going to click once and it's going to select that entire row for me. And I'm going to go to my borders and say that I would like to have no borders. And it removes the borders for me. And now it looks like the ones below. I can then repeat this process for John Stanford and Stephanie McKay as well. For adding alternative text to a chart, you're going to click on your chart and make sure that you have the chart itself and do a right click on that chart, and you're going to have a shortcut menu, and down towards the bottom is Edit Alt Text. It'll open up the Alt Text panel over on the far end, and you can add your 1 to 2 sentence description as well. Also, with your chart selected, you can do a right click on that, and it also allows you the option of inserting the caption underneath the chart. You could have it above, you could have it below, but it will be a text sentence that will describe the contents of what's inside of that chart as well. The screen reader will read that back to your blind or your limited visibility user using a screen reader. Step 4, you want to specify a column header row in tables and other table considerations. The first thing you want to do in setting up a table is to make sure that you have a header row. This is the row at the top of the table that has all of your column headers, which allows the reader to be able to tell the person listening what's going to be in each one of those columns. You also want to make sure that that header row is selected and checked or set to repeat at the top of all pages should that table extend farther than the one page that it is on. You want to make sure that you are keeping it simple, and you don't want to leave any blank cells or rows or columns. Even if they're formatted to help as separate your data, you want to make sure that your table is a full data array, no blanks in there. You also want to have the additional considerations of putting alt text onto your table so that the data array doesn't have to be read back one data point at a time to anyone with a screen reader. There can be alt text on there that gives a 1 or 2 sentence descriptor as to what that data table is supposed to be telling the reader. You also want to make sure that color is not the only distinguisher. using the same item in different colors, you want to make sure you're using contrasting shapes as well. For example, in our sample table, you notice that we do have a header row that has been indicated already, and that header row tells us what's in the 5 columns below: first name, last name, title, bureau, and release date. However, as this table has grown as data has been entered into it, that header row has not been repeated on subsequent pages. Once we start a table in a document, we can go ahead and tell Microsoft Word, through the use of table properties, to repeat the header row that we select at the top of each subsequent page should that data table extend to more than one page. We're also going to be using table properties in order to add alternative text so that the entire data table does not have to be read back to someone with a screen reader. They can go ahead and take a look at the alternative text and see a 1 to 2 sentence description of what that data should be telling them. We're also going to be dealing with the fact that we have extra rows and columns that have been added in here as blanks. In order to repeat the header row on subsequent pages, you have to first select the row that you would like to be your header row. So I am going to select my first name, last name, title, bureau, and release date. And I just select the entire row. In the upper left-hand corner of the table, you see a 4-headed arrow. That is the table properties button, and I am going to do a right click right on top of that 4-headed arrow. And down in my shortcut menu, I get table properties. When I go into the table properties, I'm going to go to the row tab, and I'm going to check the box repeat as header row at the top of each page. If you don't have anything selected, nothing's going to change in your table, but because we've selected the header row we want to be repeated, it will take that row and it will add it to any subsequent page at the top so that those column headers are available on every page, whether it's printed out or whether it's shown on the screen. Also on the table properties, we're going to add alternative text. So I'm going to go again to the 4-headed arrow for table properties and do a right click. It's going to select my entire table, and I'm going to choose table properties again. I'm going to switch from row over to alt text. This is where I put the title of my table, and I know that this is my list of released employees for 2019. And under the description, you're going to put a 1 to 2 sentence description for what all that data should be telling the reader. So it could be all of the information for all of 2019. It could be for the fiscal year 2018-19. You want to be as clear and concise as possible. This way, that entire data table does not have to be read back via a screen reader. So you would enter in that description in this section here and click OK. It holds that alternative property in there, and now anyone with a screen reader can go to that tab and read what that table is supposed to be telling them. Down at the bottom, we want to make sure that we get rid of any blank rows. So I'm going to select all 4 of those rows. I went into the left-hand margin and clicked and dragged my cursor down and selected all of those rows. I'm just going to do a right click and say I would like to delete those rows because there's no reason for a screen reader to read back 4 blank rows to a non-sighted reader. Step 5, using meaningful hyperlink text. Now, you want to use meaningful text for your hyperlinks in your documents, not just the actual web address pasted in there or something as ambiguous as just click here. You want to let that non-sighted user know where they're going to be directed and what that link is for, because that meaningful text is going to be read back to them. Also, many screen readers can extract any links that they find to a separate page for that user. And if it's just a long web address or an ambiguous link labeled simply here or click here, that may not tell enough out of the context of the document. You may also want to make sure that the entire sentence is made into the hyperlink and not just one word within that sentence for ease of use. For example, In our example newsletter from Building with Heart, they have their spring newsletter, and down at the bottom of this newsletter, they also have some links to some of their past editions. This first one is just the entire web address. This is not meaningful text. What should be there is something that says, click here to go to the Building with Heart website to find past editions of our newsletter. When it's read back with the screen reader, it tells the person listening where they're going to be directed and what they should find there. And that way, if that link is taken out of context of this newsletter, they'll know what exactly it's going to do. So to change this from the actual web address to more meaningful text, you go ahead and put your cursor right inside of that link and do a right click. You go up and go to Edit Hyperlink, and it shows you that that web address has already been entered, but it's also been entered as the text to be displayed. So for the text to be displayed, that's where I'm going to change my information, and I'm going to go ahead and paste in there that it should say, click here to go to the Building with Heart website and find past editions of our newsletter. And I will go ahead and click OK. It changes over the link so it's more meaningful text, which will be read back to the person using a screen reader, but it is still the same web link in the background. On the bottom one, we have selected just the word here to be our hyperlink. So if a screen reader reads the meaningful text, click here to go to the Building with Heart website and find past editions of the newsletter, they may click here, or click here, or click here, and they can't see that just the word here is the actual website. So you need to extend that link possibly to be the entire sentence. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and select the entire sentence, and I'm going to do a right click on it, and I'm going to go up to Edit Hyperlink again. What it says is in the text to display, it says selection in the document. And it's going to keep my link exactly the same, but it's going to extend it to be the entire selection that I have highlighted in the document, and I click OK. And it just extends that link all the way throughout the sentence, so no matter where that non-sighted person or limited visibility person may be clicking, that link will be enabled on any word within that sentence. Step 6. Using built-in formatting styles. When we are creating longer documents, we want to put headings into our documents and use the heading styles in order to allow a screen reader user to use the View menu and the navigation pane to maneuver quickly throughout a document. It'll create a bookmark to that beginning section so they can jump section by section throughout longer documents instead of having to have it read back to them page by page. We want to use the built-in styles in the document. We don't want to have to format every section heading by hand. That's a lot of extra work. But if we use a built-in style and make it look the way we want, we can apply that style very quickly with just one click at a time. If we do have a particular style that we like and we update it in our document, we can then go up and update a style to match the selection that's in our document. And if that style is in use, it'll make global changes throughout our document, or we can create brand new styles as we go through. We also want to make sure that we're not putting in any extraneous paragraph markers. So we have a page of text that ends about 3/4 of the way through a page, and we want to stop the text there and start our next section at the top of the next page. We don't want to go enter, 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 enter until we go to a new page, because it will read back those paragraph markers as blank, blank, blank to anyone using a screen reader. And usually documents end with 2 or 3 paragraph markers to signal to somebody using a screen reader that the document has ended, and they may dump out of your document early. We want to use our page break, which is a Control and Enter, to say I would like my text to stop here 3/4 of the way through this page, and I would like to do a page break and start a brand new page now. We also want to make sure we're using our section breaks and our column breaks correctly. If we are using our styles correctly, we'll be able to generate a table of contents very quickly and easily. using those headings that are in use in our document. If there are any changes to the document and those headers are used properly, we'll be able to update our table of contents very quickly and easily as well, instead of doing it by hand. We also want to make sure that we're using the list formatting, the bulleting, and the built-in indent features that are built into Microsoft Word, not just using our space bar or inserting a symbol and putting spaces in between. Things will never line up properly. In addition, we want to make sure that we're not inserting any text boxes that float over the text of our document. Screen readers can't read text boxes. They can't read within the bounds of that text box in the course of the document. It's not like an image that's been placed in line with text. It's floating on top of the document. So they will often wait until the end of the document to go through and see, is there anything else that they need to try and read, and then it will try and read the contents of those text boxes to you. You can, however, build what we call a caption box, and it looks like a text box, but it's built right into the document, and it can be read as part of the body of the document. And there's a section on page 15 which walks you through that. We'll also go through an example, and I'll show you that piece as we go through. For example, in our sample document, we have a longer document, about 5 pages. And as I look at this document, it's got a title, it's got individual section headings, and then it's got the body of the document underneath each one of those section headings. Each one of those section headings is still seen, however, as normal. Somebody with a screen reader may first come into a document, and the first thing they'll do on a longer document is go over to the View menu, and they'll click the navigation pane. When they click the navigation pane, over on the left side, it will show what headings are currently in use in the document, and it creates an interactive kind of outline. So they can go through and read section by section and find the section that they want, click on it, and jump right to it in the document, instead of having to have that document read back to them page by page. But because we haven't used any headings in the document, there is no interactive outline here. So we're going to go ahead and start putting some headings in our document. On the home ribbon, you have a whole styles box here that is broken out, and it shows you what headings you can use, and they've already been configured for you. Some of these headings may work for you, some of them may not work for you. The first thing that I see is that this document is in Cambria, which is a serif font, not a sans serif font, and it's also in 11 point. So what I'm going to do is put it into Century Gothic and 12 point, and I'm going to make it the default for this document only. So now everything has been put into Century Gothic and 12 point, and it's updated some of my styles, but not all of them. So we'll do some of those as we go along. Now we're going to go ahead and place some styles into our document. The very top, our independent auditor's report, is the title of our document, and there is usually a title style. And all I do is just put my cursor into the text and then select the style I want to place on it, and it automatically puts it on there for me. Basis of opinion sounds like it is the chapter heading or heading 1. So I am going to go ahead and put my cursor in basis of opinion and click on heading 1. Now, when I look at this, I go, it's not what I want, but I'm going to fix it later. So I'm then going to find out all my other heading 1. So basis of opinion, opinion 1 and opinion 2 sound like they're going to be heading 2 or a subheading. And then I'm going to go to responsibilities of the controller. That will also be a heading 1. Responsibility 1 and responsibility 2 will be a subheading or a heading 2. Responsibilities of the auditor, and the responsibility 1 and responsibility 2 will be a heading 2. Independence sounds like it is a new heading. Notes for the financial statement sounds like it's a new heading. And conclusions sounds like it's a new heading. So as I scroll up to the top of my document, I have put in my heading 1s. Now, I don't like this heading. I don't like what it's already been configured to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and show you how you can make a change to the heading in your document, the style in your document, and then make your heading style in your box match. So for basis of opinion, number one, it's a serif font again. So I want to go back and I want to make sure that it is a Century Gothic. I'm going to leave it at bold, and I'm going to go ahead and make it just black. And if that is what I would like my heading 1 to actually look like, I'm going to put my cursor into that text. And on heading 1, I'm going to do a right click. And the first option is update heading 1 to match the selection in my document. And I'm going to go ahead and choose it. It changed heading 1 to match what is in my document. And if heading 1 was in use anywhere else in your document, it has done a global change throughout the course of your document and updated all of them for you. For heading 2, I'm going to do this one slightly differently. Before I even apply heading 2, I'm going to say I would like my heading 2 to be, yes, Century Gothic. I would like it to be italicized, and maybe I would like it to be underlined. Whereas this one was 18, maybe I will bump this style up to be 14. So it just stands out a little from the others. If this is the style that I want, I'm going to put my cursor in the center of that particular piece of text, and I'm going to go to my heading 2 and immediately say, update my heading 2 to match what's in my document. And I update it from the beginning. And now when I place heading 2, it'll place the proper formatting styles on there for me as I go along. So opinion 1 and opinion 2. Responsibility 1, responsibility 2. Responsibility 1, responsibility 2. Nothing under independence as a subheading, nothing under notes for the financial statement, and nothing under conclusions. However, under conclusions, we have what looks like a list. Following is a list of options to consider. So at this point, we're going to probably want to make that a list in just a moment. I'm going to go up to the top. Remember that before we styled our document, there were no headings in use. And when we went to View and the navigation pane, there was no interactive outline set up. Now that we've put headings into place, we've got our basis 1, opinion 1, and opinion 2. Responsibility to the controller, responsibility 1 and 2, responsibility to auditor, responsibility 1 and 2, independence, notes of the financial statement, and the conclusions. So somebody with a screen reader can go to View, navigation pane, and now they have an interactive outline that they can go and click on. So if this is a 75-page document, and on 72, there's the notes to the financial statement, and that's all they really want to see, they can read this list of headings and say, I really want to go to the notes of financial statement, click on that, and it will bring them directly to the part of the document that they want to view. Having this is also very nice because now we have the ability to create a table of contents very quickly. To create a table of contents very quickly and easily, once I have styled my document, I'm going to go up to the top of my document and I'm going to place my cursor right in front of the first letter of the first sentence. And I'm going to do a Control and Enter. I'm pressing my Control key and Enter at the same time. And what that's done is it's given me a blank page in front of the body of my document. And on this blank page is where I'm going to put my table of contents. With my cursor in front of the very first place on this blank page, I am going to go to References and Table of Contents. And as I drop that down, I'm going to go to Automatic Table 2, which is going to call it Table of Contents. And then based on what I've used for heading 1, heading 2, and even all the way to heading 3, it will automatically create my table of contents. And I'm going to click on that, and it automatically places that right into my document. So it says that my table of contents, my basis of opinion will start on 2, and this is an interactive table of content. So if for some reason you have somebody who comes into your document and they want to jump right to the responsibilities of the auditor, they can put their cursor right on 4 and press their control key and click, and it will drop them right through to the responsibilities of the auditor where they wish to be. What's nice about this as well, let's say that somebody says, well, on page 6 we have independence, 7 is notes of the financial statement, and 8 is my conclusions. So if I go to page 6, here's my independence, and you have somebody say, well, I don't want the notes to the financial statements to be halfway in the middle of a page. I would like it to start on its own page. So we are again going to do a page break to move that section down to its own page. I'm going to place my cursor right in front of the N in notes to the financial statement, and I'm going to press my control key and enter again, and it bumps it down to its own page. My independence stops a third of the way down, and then notes to the financial statement. What this does is it allows me to do a page break and leave blank spaces in my document that won't end up affecting the rest of my document. Notes to the financial statement. Somebody says, I would also like conclusions to start on its own page. So I'm going to put my cursor in front of the C in conclusions, press my control and enter key, and it drops the conclusions to its own page as well. However, I have now affected the content of my document, which may affect how my table of content needs to be drawn. Independence is still going to be on page 6. However, my notes to the financial statement is now on page 8, and my conclusions is on page 9. At the top of my document, I have my table of contents, which still shows it starting at 6, 7, and 8. Now, unless I had a table of contents that I physically typed up, I'd have to manually change all these numbers. The only thing I need to do now is just update this table of contents. And I'm going to do a right click right on my table of contents, and one of the options is to update the field. I'll click on update field, and it says, do you want to update page numbers only or update the entire table? If I am working on this document, I know I've just affected where my sections are in the document based on the new page numbers. I could do just update page numbers only. Otherwise, if somebody else has worked on this document, I would click on update entire table so that if they added more headings in there, it will collect all of those headings as well. And I'll click OK. It updates these last sections. Independence is now showing as starting on page 6. Notes to the financial statement on page 8, conclusions on page 9. At the conclusions, we had a section that looked like it was going to be a list. The following is a list of the options to consider. If we're doing a list, we have a couple of options for doing our listing functions. You select your list, and then you have your options of doing either a bulleted list. You click once to turn it on, click once to turn it off. If you turn it on and drop down the arrow next to it, you could change what that bullet looks like. With it selected, you could also say you would like to number it. If you want to change the look and feel of the numbers, instead of being a 1 period, you could do 1 with a paren, you could do Roman numerals, you could do capital letters, smaller letters as it goes through. You could change all the different things that are on there. Or if you are doing an outline and you know that you're going to have a main, you're going to have a subheading, a sub-subheading, and it's going to go through different levels, you could say that you would like to do it in a numbered list. What this will do by doing this numbered list, by choosing also your outline, is that if you have a main topic, you type in your next topic, even if it's a subtopic, and when you tab, you put your cursor in front of that particular piece and hit tab, it automatically knows that if it's a subheading, it will be A. If it's a sub-subheading, it'll go into I, and it's going to follow the structure that it has set up here for you. In addition, a sample document I will show you. This is right from the documentation, and this is how you can create a caption box right from the body of the document without placing a text box over the top of it. So the first thing you would want to do is you would want to understand how you want to call this information out. It's either a case study, it could be a scenario, it could be an example. And so you'd want to start with that information with it's either case study, example, scenario. You would want to highlight all the text that you type in. You're just going to type it in a standard text and then highlight everything that's there. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to choose outline borders. So you go to your border tool, drop it down, and choose the outer borders, all four sides, and it will put a box around the text that you have highlighted. The third item is optional. You could choose a contrast color, a theme color in the background as a fill just to make it pop out of the document just slightly, if you want to do that. And the fourth thing that you want to do is you want to create a little piece of invisible text down on the bottom. And if you started with case study, you want to put it at the end of your case study, inside the box, end case study. If it's example, end example, scenario, end scenario. And then you want to select that piece of text and you want to make the color of the text the same color of the fill. And if you didn't use fill, you want to make your text white. So it's white on white. It doesn't show up for your sighted users, but for your non-sighted users using a screen reader, the screen reader will still read the text that's present. It's not looking at the formatting, it's looking at the text. And so it will start with case study, it will read through the information, get to the final website, and then read end case study back to your non-sighted users. Step 6 is the most involved one to master. If you're anything like me, I usually just open up Microsoft Word and start typing. Everything is usually all in normal, and then I go back and reformat all my headings by hand instead of using styles. But if you use styles, it really does save you a lot of time, especially when creating that table of contents. Step 7. Use the accessibility checker built into Microsoft Word. Now, Microsoft Word has built into the software itself an accessibility checker, but don't assume that it will find everything. You should use this as a backup. You will find the accessibility checker in current versions of Microsoft Word on the review ribbon, and there is a check accessibility button. In older versions of Microsoft Word going back to 2010, you will find this function on the File menu. You will see a Check for Issues button, and when you drop down that menu, you will see Check Accessibility. It is only going to catch about 40% of the issues. It should be used as backup after you have checked for the initial 6 steps that we have just discussed. You want to know what you are looking for and correct it first and then use the checker. You don't want to solely rely on the checker itself. I would also recommend getting a free screen reader and actually using that yourself once you are getting ready to post the file to have that screen reader read back the content. For example, we'll take a look at 2 sample documents. We'll assume that this first sample document is something that has been given to us by a coworker. It's a document they've just created and they would like to have it posted on the internet. First thing I am going to do is run my accessibility checker. So I will go to my review ribbon and I will choose Check Accessibility. And when I do that, it opens the accessibility checker on the right-hand side and it gives me the results of my inspection. There will be 3 sections on here, one for errors, one for warnings, and one for tips, if applicable. Under the errors section, it says that in this document, it is missing alternative text for picture 1, and the image or the object is not in line for picture 1 as well. Under the warnings, it says that there is hard to read text contrast, and it gives me the 3 items that it thinks would be hard to read. When I look at this document, however, I see that there's red text in use on my title, and that did not seem to be pulled up with the hard to read text contrast, especially if I have colorblind readers. If I am looking at this graphic, it's awfully light. And also down at the bottom, it did not catch that I do not have meaningful text for my hyperlink. And my document overall is in a serif font at 11 point. So the accessibility checker is not checking for certain things like sans serif, 12 point or above. It may not notice that there's not meaningful text, and it may not catch all of your contrasts. This is why it's important for you as the document author or the final check before it's posted to understand the 6 items prior to this you should be looking for before running your accessibility checker as the backup. So the first thing I want to do is make sure I'm using a sans serif font, and I also want to make sure that it's 12 point or above, because currently we're using a serif font, Cambria, and it's 11 point. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of the text in my document. I can do that by going to Home, Select, and select all, or I can put my cursor inside of the body of the document and press my Control and A key together. Selects all in my document. Because I have some items that have already been made into different font sizes, I don't want to standardize it all to 12 point. So what I do want to do is make sure that my Cambria has been switched over to Calibri. It's roughly the same size, so it shouldn't shift my document too much. Now it's updated my styles here to Calibri as well, which is very nice. So now I want to make sure that my normal style, which is in use, my heading 1 style, which is in use, and my heading 2 style, which is in use, match what's currently in my document. So I'm going to put my cursor inside of the first body paragraph, which is seen as normal. I'm going to do a right click on that and I'm going to modify it because I need to make sure that I change everything that is set for normal from 11 point to 12 point. And I'm going to click OK. It just makes everything that is set for normal 12 point. On my first heading 1 item, it's set for Calibri, which is good. I want to make sure that this heading, if it's in use again in the document, is going to match what's currently in my document. So I'm just going to do a right click on that heading, and I would like to update heading 1 to match the selection in my document. And it updates that heading to always be Calibri and 14 point. I'm going to do the same thing with everything that is set for heading 2. And I'm going to do a right click on heading 2 and update heading 2 to match what's in my document as well. So now if anybody uses these headings again, they will be correctly set for how I've redone this document to be more accessible. If I take a look at some of the items in my accessibility checker, it says I'm missing alternative text and the image is not in line for picture 1. If this were a 90-page document with 150 photos or pictures and it said picture 32, I wouldn't know exactly which one that is. So all you do is click on the picture that they're referencing and it will jump to that picture in the document for you so you know what you need to do. So first it says I need to fix the missing alternative text. On the image, I'm going to select it and do a right click, choose Edit Alt Text, and I can type in what is the alt text for that picture and close my alt text box. Notice that that error has now gone away. Image or object is not in line. For the same picture 1, I'm going to use the layout options. It's currently set to wrap, which means that every line in this paragraph is going to be red, and then the alt text, and then the next line in the paragraph will be red with the alt text, and it will continue doing that all the way through these 2 paragraphs. We want to make sure that it's set for inline with text so that alt text gets read once at the right spot. I'm going to choose inline with text and it moves my image all the way to the left-hand side, and it also puts it right in front of that particular paragraph. So we'll read the alt text once, then the rest of the paragraph. I'm going to go ahead and put my cursor in between that first word of the paragraph and the image and just hit enter to separate those a little bit. And now I'll use my 2-celled table technique in order to put the logo into one cell. It'll read the alt text once, and then the paragraphs in the second cell, and it will read the paragraphs once without repeating the alt text. Where it has shop at house salve, I will go ahead and hit my enter key. I'll go to insert. my table options and do a 2-by-1 table, 2 cells on 1 row. So I'm going to click on my image and drag it into the first cell. I'm going to shrink up that cell a little bit, and then I'm going to select my 2 paragraphs and click and drag those into the second cell. Still a 1-page document at that point. If I don't like the borders around this, I'm just going to go ahead and select over on the side and choose no borders. So now all I've really done is flip my logo to the left-hand side, not the right-hand side. But it is in line with text and it will be read once, and then the entire paragraphs in cell 2 will be read. It has my warnings. There's hard to read text contrast for shop at salvage, donate, and volunteer. It says that that light blue is too light. So I probably want to make the change to everything that is going to ever be set as heading 2. So I'm going to do a right click on that item, on that heading 2, and I'm going to modify it. And I'm going to modify it from the light blue, possibly to make it a darker blue. And click OK. And everything that has been marked as heading 2 is now in the darker blue, and my style has been set as well. And now it says all of my accessibility check items are done. I'll close my accessibility checker. But the one thing that I notice is this is still very, very, very light. This is still in red. And this is not meaningful text. So being conscientious, I'm going to go a little further. I'm going to select the image. And on the image, I'm going to go to the picture and format. And one of the options here is color. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose recolor, and I'm going to go all the way to strict black and white. And it just converts that gray tone to black and white. So it's much easier to read for everyone involved. With the red here, I don't know if I want to use red because of color blindness. So I'm going to update that style. Go to that style and right click, choose modify. And I'm going to change it from red right to black. Click OK. And now that's changed that heading for any time it's being used in the document. And down at the bottom, I want to go ahead and make a change to this particular meaningful text. Make this meaningful text instead of just the web address. Right above it, it says click the link below to locate the volunteer page on the House Salvage website. That's exactly what it should say right as that link. So I'm going to select that. And I'm going to cut that because I don't want it to have to repeat. And I'm going to do a right click right on top of that link. Go to Edit Hyperlink, and in the text to display, instead of the actual web address, I'm going to paste that small piece of text. And instead of click the link below, I'm going to put click the link to locate the volunteer page and click OK. And that way I've got meaningful text. I still have the actual web address associated with it. And now if a screen reader takes that out of this document, I will understand from the context of what's in that meaningful text exactly what I should be getting and where it's going to be taking me. For our second example, let's assume that this is an existing document. And this is a document that maybe I would have created, and I know me, I opened up Microsoft Word and I just started typing away. So everything is in normal, and I hand formatted all of my styles in this document. So it looks like it's been styled properly, but you can tell that this style for heading 1 is nowhere near that style for heading 1. That for the title is nowhere near the title that would be there. So what we're going to take a look at is, instead of running the review and check accessibility button, in the older versions of Microsoft Word, you will find that check accessibility on the file menu. check for issues, and if you drop that down, you'll get check accessibility, and it will run the report for you. So my accessibility checker, my inspection results say that there are some errors and there are some tips, but there are no warnings. So under the errors, it says that I have missing alternative text and the object is not in line for pictures 1, 2, and 3, although I'm not seeing pictures 1, 2, and 3. This could be a very long document. And then the tip is there are no headers in use in this document all throughout the document. It looks like there are, but they're not. They're all set at normal, and they've all been done by hand. That's just me. So what I want to do is I want to start walking through this document, and I want to make sure that if somebody else edits this document, they're not going to assume that this is heading 1 and apply this heading 1, which is really that look. So I want to make sure that my styles are updated to match. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that for my title style, I'm going to put my cursor in my title, and where it has a title style, I'm going to do a right click on it and say I would like to update title style to match what's in my document. And it changes that title style in the document to match how I've formatted the title in my document. For basis of opinion, I'm going to put my cursor there. It's still seen as normal, and it really should be heading 1. So I'm going to right click on heading 1, and I'm going to say I would like to update heading 1 to match the selection in my document. And it changes over that serif light blue into what's currently being used in my document. Also, opinion 1, this is really my heading 2, and it doesn't look anything like that. So I want to put my cursor into a line that I would like to be heading to, and I'm going to right click on heading 2 and say update by heading 2 to match the selection in my document. And now I know that if somebody starts working on this document again, they're going to be using the proper normal, the proper heading 1s, proper heading 2s, and the proper title style. Remember to update the rest of your document headers appropriately. Look at what's in my accessibility checker. Notice that my styles, my tips, there are no headings in use in the document, just went away because they've now been properly styled, heading 1, heading 2, and title. So I'm going to look at my 2 errors. Missing alternative text on picture 1, picture 2, picture 3, image of object not in line for picture 1, 2, and 3. To find picture 1, I'm just going to click right on picture 1 in my list, and it jumps me down to the page. So now I am farther down into my document, and this is picture 1, that's picture 2, that's picture 3. I'm assuming they're all probably in need of alternative text, and they're all probably images that are objects that are not in line. So I'm going to go ahead and fix one of them, and we would assume we would do it on all 3 of them. So the first thing I'm going to do is missing alternative text for picture 1. I'm going to right click on that image. I'm going to edit alt text. This again is our Board of Director President Ted Kellogg. I'm going to close. Notice that missing alternative text for picture 1 is now gone. I'm going to go ahead and click on this image, and I'm going to work on the image or object not in line for picture 1. I'm going to use my layout options. It's currently set to wrap the text, which means it's going to read Board of Directors President Ted Kellogg on every single line in this paragraph. So I'm going to make it in line with text. It bumps me all the way down to meet our Board of Directors. So what I want to do is I want to put this image, I'm going to click and drag it, and notice that dark line moves me around right in front of his bio. So now I have my header, I have my alt text, and then I have his bio one time, and I'm going to put my cursor in that first word of the paragraph and use my arrow keys to backspace it over to between his image and his bio and just hit enter. Now again, we could leave it this way because that's been taken care of on both of them. Some people don't like that. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to put an enter in here. And I'm going to insert a small two-celled table, drag his picture into it, and then I'm going to take his bio and drag it into the other side. If I don't like the borders, I'm going to go into the left-hand margin and click on that. I'm going to remove and say no borders. And now we're back to that. And then we can, notice that it's taken it out of missing alternative text and object not in line. And we can repeat it for pictures 2 and pictures 3 as well. I won't go through all 3 of those, but that will give you an idea of how to correct that. So in conclusion, you want to make sure that you're following the 7 steps in order to create accessible documents using Microsoft Word. You want to make sure you're using an appropriate font style, sans serif, and size, 12 point or above, but always check for your department's preferences. You want to use color appropriately. You want to add alternative text to your images, and you can even use captions. You want to specify column header rows in tables, repeat those header rows on subsequent pages. You want to make sure your tables are free of blank cells, blank rows, blank columns. You want to use meaningful hyperlink text so that when that text is read back to the non-sighted user, they understand where they're going to go and what they're going to be getting from that link. You also want to make sure you're using the built-in formatting styles to help you create an online table of contents in that view navigation pane, as well as help you physically create a table of contents in your documents. And you want to use the check accessibility feature, which is built right into Microsoft Word. In addition, there are a lot of different places you can go for extra help on resources for creating accessible documents. On the Inside DCA website, Solid has put together an accessibility materials page for you, and that's at the link that is listed there. In addition, there are quite a few Did You Know articles that have been written regarding accessibility and the different steps to follow through. There are some that go back to August of 2020 with contrasting colors. There's the initial one that was at the end of last year as well. And you can get to all your Did You Know articles right off of the homepage of the Inside DCA website. I would recommend, if you have a lot of information or questions, that you go to the Department of Rehabilitation or you go to the Department of Technology, and they have a lot of online pages. They have a lot of online information, and they also have classes that they are offering at a cost. But they will go in for an entire 8-hour course on how to work your Microsoft Office documents and make them more accessible, and an 8-hour class on how to remediate PDF documents using PDF itself if that source document is not available. In addition, if you have just general questions and you want to look up a step or two, go out and just Google on YouTube and pull up some videos. They're mostly educational sites, as most of the educational sites had to go through this process years ago since all of their curriculum was going online. At this point, I thank you for your time. I hope this has been helpful. Again, my name is Bill Zariello, and I work with the Solid Training Unit at the Department of Consumer Affairs, and I wish you good luck.